Think you know your school? Think again. Get ready to face real horror stories that reveal what really lurks in the corridors you've never noticed. Challenge your fears and uncover what lies behind the seemingly innocent facade of schools. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Let's move on to the first story.
It was my first year at university. I had just unpacked all my things in my room, and my family had just left. Later that same day, my roommate finally arrived. From the start, I noticed that this guy was the least socially skilled person I had ever met. I introduced myself as Alex, extending my hand for a handshake. He paused, looked at my hand as if he didn't understand, laughed, and gave me a nearly dead handshake. I had to ask his name because he didn't even tell me when we shook hands. His name was Ryan. I tried to make small talk, but he only answered my questions with a yes or no, occasionally laughing or smiling awkwardly. Within minutes, we were both sitting on our beds, each on his phone, not speaking to each other. I was frustrated and planned to request a new roommate. Anyone would be better than Ryan. I thought Ryan was just a very strange guy, but I soon found out he was much more than that. I met some of the other people on my floor, and they seemed nice, so that was good. I returned to my dorm after taking a walk around campus on the first night. I found Ryan still in the same position he was in when I left. I said, "Hi, Ryan," and he didn't respond, not surprisingly. It was 9 p.m., and I had nothing to do, so I turned off the light on my side of the room and went to sleep. However, I couldn't fall asleep that early. Ryan was on his laptop until 3 a.m. when he finally closed it. I fell asleep quickly but woke up within an hour. The curtains in our room were open, and the moonlight was now flooding the room, making everything visible, including Ryan sitting on the edge of the bed watching me. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and said, "Ryan, what the heck are you doing?" He whispered back, "Oh, sorry," and lay down. The next morning, I woke up to find that Ryan had already gotten up. It seemed to be the first time he had left the room. It was Saturday, the first Saturday of the year, which meant orientation and all the festivities on campus. During orientation, while my group was walking through the gardens, I heard a couple of students in front of me saying, "What is that guy doing there?" I saw who they were talking about. It was Ryan, sitting literally in the dirt behind a bush, rubbing the bark of a tree with his hand. The orientation leader didn't notice, otherwise, I'm sure she would have said something. I just walked past them, without saying anything, eventually telling the two kids I met that he was my roommate, as a way to start a conversation and maybe make some friends. They apologized for me, but none of us knew if it was appropriate to laugh or not, but we laughed. I became friends with those two kids and we arranged to meet up that night. I also found out when I returned to my dorm that the school had found me a new roommate. Things seemed to be changing rapidly for the better. I left the room that night to meet the two kids I had met. When I returned, Ryan was sitting in the chair facing the door. I asked, "Is everything okay?" He responded no very emphatically. I sat on my bed, opened my laptop, and realized I had forgotten to lock it. I also noticed that all my emails had been opened, emails I was sure I hadn't even read, and several of my folders had also been opened. He must have snooped through my laptop. When I asked him if it was him, he responded no very loudly, half a second after I finished the question. I could read him like a book. This creepy guy had literally been tampering with my computer while I was out. I knew he had done it, but I didn't confront him. I was ready to go to sleep, so as I was getting into bed and looking for my pajamas, I felt like my clothes had been messed with too. I knew I would be leaving there for good the next day, so I said nothing. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a zipper. I sat up and saw Ryan rummaging through my bag. I turned on the light this time and confronted him about it. He pretended not to know, saying, "I think you accidentally took my toothbrush." It was the smartest thing he had shown up until that point. Still, I knew he was lying and something was wrong with him, so I couldn't be violent with him. The next day, I met my new roommate in the same building, and everything went well. On Sunday night, after having a decent conversation with my new roommate, who wasn't very social but was 1,000 times better than Ryan, we both turned off the lights and went to sleep. For the third consecutive night, I woke up at some point in the night to a strange sound. It was a weird clicking sound, It wasn't constant, but I heard it at least twice every 30 seconds. I got up expecting to find something innocent, like a heavy bag pressing on a loose floorboard or even a mouse. But as I looked around the room, I realized the sound was actually coming from the other side of the door. The night light in the common area was always on, so when I looked through the peephole, I could see the top of someone's head standing on the other side of our door. They were looking down, so I couldn't see their face, but now that I was paying attention, I realized the small clicking sounds were coming from the door handle. I called the campus police number, and they arrived in less than 5 minutes to the common room. Only then did I feel safe to open the door. The officers arrested Ryan. I was sure it was him. I told them everything, that he was my former roommate who had been going through my stuff, so I moved out only to find him trying to break into my new room. They took him away. I don't know what happened to him after that, but I never saw him again. He was either suspended for a semester or expelled. I managed to finish the rest of my years at university like everyone else. However, the terrible experience I had with Ryan still comes back to my mind from time to time.
I studied at university for 2 years and quickly made a large group of friends there. We would go out every weekend. On one October Friday night, when my group had no big plans, two close friends and I decided to spend time at a nearby natural reserve by the lake. There was a small open space across the lake that was convenient for making bonfires, as it was far from the view of the university or campus security. Sometimes students came here to smoke marijuana, drink, and use basically all other drugs. It was a relatively unknown spot to most on campus, and we liked that. That night, we brought some beers, started a bonfire, and hung out together, which we used to call the brochette back then. As the night went on, time seemed to pass more quickly as the alcohol began to take effect. Eventually, it reached the point where we were so hyped up that two friends were on the ground, rolling in the leaves. That's when my other friend stopped laughing and walked away. We all stayed alert and heard the sound of leaves and branches rustling in the distance. We tossed our bottles into the lake, since we were all underage, and it wasn't uncommon for campus police to patrol the woods on weekends to catch young people using drugs. We stored the rest of the beers in a backpack. I was moderately drunk, so my paranoia was higher than usual. It was probably the same for all of us. The bonfire exposed us to anyone passing through the woods, but the fact was that this place was so unknown and distant from campus that it was rare to encounter someone so deep in the woods. It seemed to be just one person in the distance. The sound of a branch breaking not too far from us startled us all. None of us were really confrontational in our group, so we lacked that one person who would have the confidence to stand up and shout at whoever was out there. Instead, we all remained silent, urging each other to stay quiet. We heard what sounded like someone or something circling around our camp, or at least walking in an S pattern around our camp. It literally felt like we were in a movie, because these proximity sounds, like branches breaking and leaves crunching on the ground, continued, and we laughed about it at first. But I personally soon became terrified of who or what it could be. Out of nowhere, a huge crash startled us. At first, I didn't understand what caused the sound, even seeing it. It took me a few seconds to process that a branch had been thrown into the middle of our small bonfire. One of my two friends ran off, while my other friend and I sat there, looking at each other, half laughing, half worried. I think we still didn't know if it was some kind of prank or not. Then, my friend let out a scream of pain when he was hit in the face by another tree branch. I grabbed the backpack, helped my friend get up from the ground, and we ran towards our dormitory. When we reached the road that separated the natural reserve from our dormitory, we stopped to catch our breath. But whoever was out there proved to be following us when we heard footsteps approaching the road. We kept running back to the dormitory, and when we got to our floor, we found our other friend in his room. It was already 10:02 p.m. We looked out of his room's window down towards the woods. There was someone walking back and forth near the woods, and every time a car passed, that person would return to the woods. Eventually, whoever it was went back into the woods for good, never to be seen by us again. We continued our drinking session in the dorm room, and within 10 minutes, we were all laughing about it. It was only the next morning that we realized how terrifying that experience had truly been. We never went back to the woods after dark.
In my second year, I had a single room in the corner of the floor, somewhat isolated from the other rooms in the dormitory, as it was in its own small section. You had to turn the corner to see the other rooms. It was nice because I could still hang out with friends from my floor, invite people to my room, and at the same time, have privacy when it was time to do homework or sleep. A few weeks into the semester, while studying for a biology exam, the silence was interrupted by a noise. It took me a moment to realize it was a faint knock on the door. It was so soft that I almost didn't hear it. I shouted, "Come in," but the door didn't open. So, I got up to open it, but there was no one there. I went to the corner to look down the hallway, but no one was there. Someone was clearly playing a trick on me. I went back to bed and continued studying, leaving the door open this time. No one came back. The next night, a few minutes after turning off the light in my room to go to sleep, the knocking at the door returned, but this time it was much louder, almost like a banging. I asked who's there, and again, the banging stopped and no one answered. I quickly got out of bed, opened the door, but my private hallway was empty. I ran the 10 steps from my door to the corner to look down the main hallway, and there was no one. The next morning, I asked some of the other kids if they were playing a prank on me. They all said no. The following night, I woke up after having slept for 3 hours. Someone was knocking on my door again, but this time it was louder than ever. I struggled to decide whether to open the door or not. This time, with a bit of courage, I jumped out of bed and opened the door. There was no one there, as I expected, but this time I raced down the narrow hallway that separated my room. When I turned the corner, I saw the back of someone disappearing around the far corner, on the opposite side of the hallway. I ran as fast as I could down the hallway, and when I reached the next corner, where I had seen the person a few seconds earlier, I saw a door at the end of the hallway closing. It wasn't a dorm room, it was a bathroom. Feeling ready to confront whoever was playing these tricks, I pushed the bathroom door open forcefully. The light was off, and I could sense the room, expecting to see someone hiding inside, but I saw no one. My first instinct was to check the 2 bathroom stalls, both of which were closed. I knelt down and looked under both stalls. 2 pairs of heavy black boots were visible. I was confused. The boots were on the floor, but there was no one to wear them. Then I heard a chilling laugh. It wasn't a female or childish laugh. It was the kind of laugh I could only imagine coming from an old, crazy man. For some reason, my confidence vanished, and I was terrified. So, I ran back to my room, closed the door, jumped back into my bed, and started messaging all my friends, but of course, everyone was asleep. The knocking happened one more time that night. I ignored it. It lasted about 30 seconds before the person gave up. The next day, I talked to everyone on my floor. No one else had heard any knocking, and everyone swore they weren't playing a prank on me. Everyone seemed sincere. I don't know why that person chose to harass me or who they were. Considering the possibilities, the figure I saw seemed to be an older man, and that unsettles me.
This happened during the first week of my freshman year at college. I was starting to feel comfortable with my roommate. He was set on joining a fraternity, and recruitment week was about to begin. However, the party started on Thursday of the first week. My roommate didn't want to go alone, as it would be harder to meet people that way, so he wanted me to come with him. I happily agreed to go along, even though I had no interest in joining a fraternity. Still, I intended to go to the parties. After all, I was at a college known for its parties. My roommate wanted to go to a fraternity party on Thursday, and then to parties at different fraternity houses on Friday and Saturday. That Thursday night, we were heading to one of the less prestigious fraternities. I'm almost sure it was a fraternity as well, but their logic in going was to have an alternative fraternity in case the more popular ones were crowded. The fraternity house was far from campus, in a more rundown part of town. We stopped in front of a house on a corner, and if it weren't for the music and cars parked everywhere, we would never have guessed that house was a fraternity. It looked like they were just settled with the first house they found. We knocked on the door and were immediately greeted by a short, chubby guy, wearing a white t-shirt and holding a disposable cup. His shirt was stained with sweat under the arms and around the stomach area. He invited us in. The party itself was happening in a poorly lit room, where there were about 50 guys crammed into the living room. It was ridiculously hot inside. And to make matters worse, I think I saw only 2 girls at the entire party, and neither was remotely attractive. I stayed at the party for about 20 minutes, talking to one overweight guy after another, all giving off a weird vibe. Eventually, I signaled to my roommate to get ready to leave, but a large group of guys near the door made us decide to wait a bit longer to avoid the awkwardness of leaving early. I kept drinking the cheap beers that were being served. I think I had 5 cups before I even started feeling anything. A big guy approached me with a small bottle in his hand and handed it to me, smiling and saying it would get me drunk. I laughed awkwardly and thanked him, hoping he would leave, but he just stood there watching me, as if he was waiting for me to drink it. So I drank. It was probably the equivalent of 2 shots of some strong liquor. The guy then started talking to me, and every time I hinted that I wanted to leave, he tried to involve me more in the conversation, where things quickly started getting pretty confusing. I remember feeling dizzy all of a sudden, and the room seemed to be darkening. That was the last thing I remember before waking up in a dark room, lying on a bed. I could hear the sound of muffled music behind closed doors, so I knew I was still in the fraternity house. It was a very dark room, but I could still make out some furniture in the space, a small closet door, but not much more than that. But even with the loud music, I heard the sound of a plastic bag being accidentally stepped on inside the closet. I ran out of that room and down the stairs back to the crowded living room. I found my roommate and pushed him out the front door, passing by the group of guys still in a circle right next to it. During the drive back to campus, I told my roommate that I had been drugged. He almost called the police, but I said it would be pointless and useless. My roommate then asked me an uncomfortable question: had I been assaulted? I didn't feel any pain and my clothes were still in place, so I assumed I hadn't. When I checked the time, I realized I had been unconscious for only about 10 minutes before waking up. Whatever the guy gave me must have been ineffective or something. Thank God. That was my experience in college, attending a secret party at a shady fraternity house, and it remains the most frightening experience of my life. Thanks for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any new and terrifying videos.